Welcome. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at this ZahyoX half-inch solid carbide spiral upcut bit. So this was provided to me by the distributor, but they're not compensating me for this video and they're not reviewing it before I post it. If you find this video helpful and you want to purchase one of these, I'll put a link to it in the description on Amazon, and if you use that link it helps me out a little bit and doesn't cost you anything extra. So let's get this open. So here we have the bit. Carefully pull this out. Okay. So this has a half-inch cutting diameter, has a half-inch shank, and a 1 1/4 inch cutting length, and it's 3 inches overall. So this has a nano coating on it to keep it cooler and help it cut better and last longer. This is a solid carbide bit, so this is going to be very hard, so you want to make sure you don't drop it on anything hard. So this has 2 flutes on it, one on either side. And this is a upcut bit, so where a downcut bit would compress fibers against the wood, this pulls fibers up from the wood. So you could potentially get tear out on the top with this, but a bit like this is good for doing things like cutting grooves. So if you're cutting a mortise for a mortise and tenon, you want something that will clear the chips when you cut that groove. Now oftentimes the face of where you're cutting that mortise will not be showing anyway if you do have a little tear out. Although you're not necessarily going to get tear out. It's just not going to do anything specific to prevent it. So I just wanted to get a close-up of this on my bench where I have good lighting. Now let's head to my shop and test this out. Okay, so I have my router here and I have the bit, so I'll get it out. So I currently have the half-inch collet in my router. So I'm going to insert this. I want to make sure I don't bottom it out. So now I'll tighten it down. Okay, so now I can install this in my router base, and I have my side guide on. Okay, so I have the bit installed. So this is a plunge router. So there's a handle here. I can press down on this and the base will move. So let me take the side guide off just for a minute. And I have a hole in my bench here where the router bit can plunge into. So if I pull on this handle, this can go up and down. And here we have a stepped guide. Now different routers might have different features, but this is a feature you can use with this router. So I can plunge this down and get it even with the base, or close. So this is flush with the base right now, or pretty close to flush. And then I'll go over here and loosen this, and I'll press it down on the top of this. And each one of these steps, I think it's 1/8 of an inch. So if I want to plunge down 1/8 of an inch, I can let the pressure off here, and I can turn this, and then when I plunge down, it's going to stop on there. You want to make sure that's tight, and then we have this sticking out about 1/8 of an inch. So what this allows us to do is to take multiple passes. I don't want to do this full depth. That's a lot to do in one depth. So I can do a pass, I can rotate this, and I can plunge it down to the next level and just keep doing that to progress through the different depths. So I'll get the side guide back on, and the first thing I'm going to do is just cut a little groove in here so we can see what it looks like. Now this is an upcut bit, so it may tear out at the top a little bit, but it should do a good job of clearing those chips. Okay, so I'm going to do a test cut here. I have one here because I forgot to hit record, so we have a sneak peek of what this is going to look like. So I was using that edge guide, and when I first started cutting, I wasn't holding it tight enough to this edge, and it did slip off, so we're a little wider here. But otherwise, that cut incredibly good. And even though this is an upcut bit, it's sharp enough that we didn't have any tear out on the top. Now the first one I cut was a little bit better than the second one. So to prevent that from wandering around, if you're doing lots of mortises, it can be helpful to make a template that keeps this from moving back and forth. Let me get my calipers out. Let's measure this. So here we got 0.507 inches, and here we got 0.5045. So I'd say that's very accurate. This is not machinist work, this is just woodworking. So that's really right at 1/2 inch. I really like how well that cleared the chips out of there. By doing so, it keeps that bit cool so it can cut cleaner. So I'm going to gather some more materials so we can make a mortise and tenon. Okay, so I have this set up to make a mortise and tenon joint, and I'm going to be making a loose tenon joint. So I'll have a mortise in both pieces, and I'll use this tenon in between. Now this is very short. You typically make this longer, but this is just for demonstration. So in order to cut it, before I used the edge guide, but this time I made a little template on my laser cutter. Now you could easily make this manually. This is a 3/4 inch slot. You could take a 3/4 inch Forstner bit on a drill press and drill 2 holes and then cut between them to make a slot. So that's going to line up here where I want to cut my mortise. Now to space it from the edge, I'm just going to use this multi-mark and I'll bring it out 3/4 of an inch. And this will get clamped on. And then I have a collar in my router bit that will fit in there. It's 3/4 inch. I used a centering cone to center it up so the bit is exactly in the center of this. Also have dust collection hooked up here, and then I actually just put some tape over the dust collection to cover that up a little bit more. So I'm going to stick this in here and I'll lower it and make a bunch of passes. So this will fit in here. It's a pretty tight fit, which is what I want. I'll show a close-up of this in just a minute. So I want this piece to go here. So I want to make sure I line up the same face of my jig, and I want to space it from the edge the same distance. And that will be this edge here. So for this cut, I'll be going into end grain. Okay, so here I have my mortise, super smooth here. Now it's just ever so slightly rough on the bottom, which is not a problem. And it's not super rough, it's just smoother on the edges. Now this one is super smooth on the bottom. So now I can take my loose tenon, if I can get it to fit, but there we go. It's lined up nice right there. Now this is just construction grade lumber, so we have a big seam there. Normally you would use straighter wood, but this is to demonstrate the point. So to make the tenon, I just planed the wood down to 1/2 inch. I rounded over the edges with a plane. You could also use a sander or a router bit or something. You could even cut the tenon a little bit undersized, or you could use a chisel to square up the holes. But that fits super nice. So that's the ZahyoX 1/2 inch spiral upcut bit. I really like how cleanly and easily this cuts slots in wood. Since it's an upcut bit, it does an excellent job of clearing the chips. Now I had my vac hooked up here, and it also will pull those chips up, and then the vac can collect them. Now the vac system on my router isn't perfect, but I feel this is better than a regular straight cut bit. Now spiral upcut bits can leave some tear out, but if we look at the cut here, it's very clean. There's maybe ever so slightly a bit here. Of course, on a mortise and tenon, it's not a big deal, but you can look at these edges here are very straight. So even though this is an upcut bit, it is doing a shear cut, which is likely cutting down on any tear out. Now different woods can behave differently, so that's something to keep in mind. So a bit like this would be great for mortise and tenon work. You could use this to cut dados, finger joints. There are many things you could use a bit like this for. Now it has this coating on it to help keep it cool and hopefully keep it cleaner, so it should cut better longer. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you liked this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.